Salam. Welcome to Muslim Viewpoint, a new podcast series powered by American Muslim Today, a groundbreaking non-profit digital newspaper which champions civic engagement. AMT informs and empowers the diverse voices of almost 30 million Muslims here in the US and other Western countries. I'm Rifat Malik, I'm AMT's editor-in-chief, and today we have an interview with Mona Kafeel, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Texas Muslim Women's Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping survivors of domestic abuse. According to research by Everytown for gun safety, access to a gun makes it 5 times more likely that an abusive partner will kill his female victim. Kafeel sat down with our Maya after a Chicago Muslim father was arrested for shooting and killing his wife and 3 daughters. She discusses how the community can become more aware of the signs of abuse and how to seek help.
First of all, thank you so much for having a conversation about this very difficult topic. It's not easy and it is not fancy enough. But is that a reality that women are being murdered? Yes, it is. And you have seen the uptick of especially minority women. And here is the challenge with minority women. If somebody who needs to have access to services, women who belong to minority groups, they have additional barriers. If a mainstream person has, let's say, barriers to the person who doesn't speak the language, who's afraid of what will happen to them once they leave the situation, are manifold. So a lot of women think it's okay to stay in that abusive situation rather than leave. And the family, whether it is her family, the survivor's family, or the abuser family, both families play a very critical role and continuously share that staying together is optimum for children as well as themselves, because you don't want a broken home for children. Not realizing that this broken home can further break the children. And in so many cases, in Ellen, in Chicago, in Houston, the kids were killed along with the parent. And in Arlington also. So the families have to understand, truly, is this staying together is the optimum solution? Or is this in denial? Are we being in denial? What are the couple or the family is facing? So families play a very critical role in our culture, in our society, and a lot of times in our own backyards. Our families are, make or break.
Yeah, and then exactly. So, what do you think? What kind of behaviors or ideologies within the culture, kind of perpetrate these things, allow these tragedies to happen?
I can go on and on and on. We can have a separate conversation on that. But I think it starts with the core factor of male privilege versus female. That's the baseline, where male has way more privileges and way more authority. And here's the thing. We can easily call that male is an abuser. But who is raising that male when he was a child? Mother, a woman was raising that person. So knowing that mother has to be so aware of how she's raising a boy versus how she's raising a girl. So that is the basic unit or a building block. And also understanding that is this issue a power and control issue, or is this just everyday regular fight that has nothing to do with power and control? So people don't realize the difference. And when they don't realize the difference, they fall into that cycle of abuse. So knowing from the get-go that this is a pattern of behavior, this is not a random outburst, random fight, this is a cyclical thing. These are the 2 basic things. One, We as women are raising sons. We do a better job of raising sons. Second, women and even men, I'm telling you, men do get abused and they are hard to come by. It is harder for them to come and talk about it. Yes, is this number high enough? Not as much as women. And specifically, when we talk about intersection of gun violence and domestic violence, 100%, women are the victims. So when we talk about women being abused, and the number is 1 in 4, men being abused is 1.7. But right now, the numbers show that 100% women are killed by their intimate partner when there's a gun involved in the house.
So, how can the Muslim community specifically advocate for more awareness around this issue of domestic abuse, and then especially how it overlaps with gun violence?
What Muslim families can do is, first of all, work on the culture change from within. The change happens from within, and the culture change is the hardest. And when I say culture change, how do you perceive your parenting? Are you truly giving a lot of privileges to son versus daughter? And I see that even in highly educated world travelers, broad horizon folks, because that culture of males would be the caretakers, so we invest more in men, versus women are going to go to somebody else's house. They will not be our caregivers, so why should we invest in them? That still exists in our culture and a lot of Muslim families. And right now, yes, the tides are turning. A lot of time, girls take care of their parents. But that investment of boys is so old way of thinking, old school of thought. And that's where they get away with anything and everything. So that needs to change. That basic unit or that basic culture and understanding has to change. And again, it starts with women. We are mothers. How do we bring that change?
Right, and then so obviously, we've talked about what individuals can do, what the community can do, but of course, on a larger scale, nationally, we want gun laws, we want domestic violence laws, things to actually protect us from these things happening, from the wrong guns. So maybe can you talk about that? What's the best way to approach the subject? How do we lobby for those of laws and legislation?
I think that another is a Pandora box that when we talk about it, because it can go on and on. But I think for us as a domestic violence agency, we promote simple gun law reforms, which is how can we give a gun into somebody who's a repeat offender or somebody who is a known violent person. And I think we always work on the policy side of it. Are we there yet? Not at all. Not at all. And here's another thing. If you do your research, the highest gun ownership rate is in the world is Switzerland. Almost every household owns a gun. The question is, are their homicide levels as high as us? No, not at all. So I think that's a good research to check into, because how are we different than them? Gun ownership is there. Nobody's saying do not own a gun. But what are some additional things that they are doing, the checks and balances, that we don't even want to talk about it? All we're saying is have checks and balances, and that's it. That is absolutely necessary. We are losing our youth. We are losing women to that. So common sense, common sense.
Right. And then I don't really have any further questions for you on the subject unless you would just like to add anything about maybe what you hope for the more national, larger narrative of, how loose gun laws might affect, as you said, domestic violence and, partners being killed by one another.
Honestly, nationally, if you give me an option on what should we be doing, I think as domestic violence agency, as our own community, even Muslim community, or any faith-based community, right? Because domestic violence is not restricted to one faith. We see everyone and everyone, whoever has that issue of power and control. So one thing that I would love for people to invest in, whether they are individuals or there are foundations or there are federal agencies, to invest in prevention program. We don't have enough on prevention. How do we prevent? Everybody talks about going upstream and catching those babies. We don't know where they're coming from, but we are constantly taking them out of a river. But how do we go and take care of upstream? So same thing with domestic violence. How do we prevent? We as agencies or we as community need to go to high schools. We need to go to elementary school, talk about what is a better relationship looks like. What is a good communication? What is a safe communication? What are some warning signs? And yes, the warning signs are there. How do we take care of it? And always remember, when we talk about the intervention, 1 in 4 women will go through domestic violence in their lifetime in USA. If you have 10 friends, some of them are going through some kind of violence. That's how high it is. But when we talk about prevention, are we reaching 1 in 4 women so that they can be saved? No, not at all. Organizations such as ours and many other organizations, my sister organizations, do we get enough funding to do the prevention work? Not at all. We are not even reaching 1 in 100 women. So they are not even aware. My heartbreaking point was when this lady in Arlington, when she was killed by her husband in front of her children, 4 children in Arlington. I went to her funeral and I was asking her friends. They were besides themselves. I was asking them, do you know there is organizations just like TMWF? There are many in Tarrant County. There are many in Dallas County. Are you aware that there are organizations who could have helped her? And believe me, all of them said no. I wish we had known. I wish we had known. So that's the sad part when I talk about locally and nationally that we don't have prevention. We are not going into these local communities and talking about it. And that's where we fail. That's exactly where we fail, when somebody doesn't even know how they can be of help.
Thank you for joining us this week. And from me and Maya, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at American Muslim Today. And if you'd like to read more about this story and access more digital content, feel free to check out our website, AmericanMuslimToday.com. We'll see you next week on The Muslim Viewpoint.